Hey guys, Stealth here. After showing you the replay from the American support deck, I thought it was only fair to also do a replay of a support deck I played for the USSR, or at least the Red 4. And in this case I am using a Poland support deck. Now this Polish support deck is pretty much the same as my American deck. It's focused mainly on attacking air units, so putting up a lot of AA. And also working with artillery and infantry to force the enemy back or hold zones so that my allies can attack. Now this game played out a bit differently than I had expected because I was a lot more aggressive than I thought I could be with this deck. My initial play was to start from this Victor area, head for uniform because uniform gives you a resupply line. Capture Juliet and India, and then see if I can capture Hotel, because this has a really nice commanding watch over the sector surrounding it, and especially Foxtrot, which is their resupply zone. So to do this opening, I'm going to be coming in with a couple of tanks. These are going to be the first on the move because they're the slowest. I have some AA units, some Shilkas, some Sopols. And over here I have 8 helicopters carrying light infantry, so that's infantry with long range ATGMs. But it's a standard infantry group, so it's 10 guys. Also what I found is not to underestimate these so-called choppers, because their autocannon is quite good. So what I'm doing here is immediately calling in some long range AA as well, these Niwas. I wanted to have those here initially because I wasn't sure what exactly I'd be facing here, so I had to hold them back a little. They have a 4.5 kilometer range, so they can do excellent work even from back here. I ordered my Sokol helicopters with the infantry to spread out across these houses, because if you have these, then you can block off this road with ATGMs. You can more or less defend against this area, and of course this thing is entirely hopeless because of all the trees in here. Now you can see that immediately someone is starting to fire cluster artillery at this position, which is too early. There's nothing here yet, so this was probably one of the less experienced players of their team. As you can see, my command vehicle, which is a Scott IFV / APC, I think APC is more like it. Anyway, it's a pretty good command vehicle. It goes very fast off-road and very fast on-road, 150 kph, since it's a wheeled vehicle. I only have 5 of these in my deck, so I gotta be a bit careful with them. And luckily this thing got narrowly missed by the artillery. So here we are, offloading the infantry. I'm putting them in strategic positions. These guys can cover the road. These guys can cover the road as well when they fail to get a good shot at them. These things are more or less tripwire defense for anything that comes down here. And these are reserves which I can deploy along any of these buildings, provided there's a threat there. Now, I have the zone, so I can now bring in reinforcements. And not only I will be bringing in reinforcement, but my ally as well. And my ally here did a very good job in both Ivan and Jot to defend against Gregory, which is the opposite sector, and it's also a land reinforcement zone. So Blue 4 can get a lot of units from this zone, while I can get a lot of units from that zone. Now I immediately call in a couple of these Topaz 2As with the Grom AA unit. And with these guys I have a very solid setup in the anti-air defense and anti-ground defense here. I could use a bit more vehicles, and my tanks are starting to arrive, so I do have some support there. I also brought in 2 scout tanks. They were set to quick move here, so I forgot about them for a little bit. Which is bad because you always want to have recon, so try not to make the same mistake I did. Try to keep recon moving, or try to keep it in a forward position where I can actually do recon, because out here it's completely useless. Anyway, I decided to be a bit aggressive here. There was nothing coming from this side just yet, so I thought, well, maybe I can just push in here. So I'm moving up with my infantry. These guys are regular troops, but they do go pretty fast at 25 kph, so I was pretty happy with their response. And I thought about using these bushes here to create some cover for the infantry to shoot over with their ATGMs, but getting there would be pretty tough, or at least so I thought. Here you can see the Grom, which is getting ready to help these guys out in case there's an air threat. My Niwas had to come all the way from the back, so they finally arrived, and I also have some more Groms in here. and they are going to be unloading AA units here in case there's a helicopter push coming from this side. I do know that this side is quite weak. I don't have any anti-ground units, but so be it. I was just too focused on Cheriton and this zone. I immediately called in a Scott command vehicle here as well, because this is a very important zone. This gives you +8 points. And since it was a large team and a lot of income was required to win the game, I thought, okay, immediately capture this zone. And this allowed my ally, let's see if I can get his name, what's that called? Zason 181. It allowed him to call in more infantry, which was really going to be needed against all of these Bradleys and their accompanying riflemen. So, this was interesting. I pushed into this zone. I didn't even have recon in yet, but my infantry here was able to spot their command helicopter, which was just sitting in the open. A better position for the command helicopter would have been here behind the bush, because then I couldn't see it right away. These were some helicopters. This is a Black Hawk and this is a Frog. So I knew that there was some infantry around. I just didn't know exactly what kind yet. Immediately put down a command marker here, or an attack marker. Get this thing out of the way. And since I'm not taking fire of any kind, I decided to be really aggressive, really force them out of this sector right away. And as you can see, I have vehicles up here now, I have infantry, and I'm not taking fire. Tanks are engaging the command vehicle, and that's my first 100 points. In the meanwhile, I'm also calling in some additional command vehicles. I want to have this guy ready to go into this zone, because this gives you another +7. And I want to be able to support my ally here, so I'm going to need to call in some additional vehicles. Because these Bradleys with their autocannons, those Bushmasters, are absolutely chewing up these empty LBVs, which only come with machine guns. Of course, the infantry could do something against these IFVs, but they did need some help. I decided to fire some napalm launch at this town, because I knew there was going to be some infantry in there, because those things had just offloaded. As you can see, something blue just popped up here, and they destroyed my Topaz. Turned out to be Delta Force, and not even that many of them. And these Delta Force are shaken, both from the attack from the tanks and from the napalm, so they were quite scared and easily pushed out of the way. Now, it was interesting to watch this area, because I was paying attention to both my zone and this zone, because there wasn't really a lot going on here. It was just seemingly a huge build-up of infantry. As you can see, he has 40, 80, 120, 160 almost, 180 guys in here. In the meanwhile, in my sector, there was a Thunderbolt coming in, which was coming to deal with my tanks. Now, this was quite risky for him, because he had no idea what kind of AA I had in here. There was no recon unit I'd spotted. So he just took out 2 T-72s for 45 points each, using a plane which is worth 140, and he's going to regret that. So, I decide to push up all of my infantry. Some go into these bushes, some go into these bushes, and once this smoke has cleared up, I'm going to find some infantry in these buildings. So I do need to deal with those, because they are quite dangerous to my own infantry. And here you can see my Scott moving up. By now I'm in control of a lot of zones. I'm holding Cheriton, I am holding Jot, and I'm holding Uliana with all of my command vehicles. And I also have one in Sergei, so that my other allies don't have to do that. So I got 4 command vehicles in play. Now, this was bad. My command vehicle was not in cover. I just told it to move fast, and then I was micromanaging my infantry. So I had not accurately positioned this thing, which means it was not in cover and an easy target. And since this infantry was still in here, they could spot my command vehicle, and I'm going to regret not positioning those in cover. Now, we got an interesting push coming in. We got a couple of helicopters, and just look how good these Groms are. Weapon away. Helicopter down. 130 points. This cost me 20 points for the infantry and possibly 20 points for the vehicle. So they just scored about 3 times their worth. Kiowa Warrior. Very expensive recon helicopter. Goes down. Another 100 points down. Now, because of my napalm strike earlier, these riflemen were already pretty thinned out. And I was able to push them out of the way using my light infantry. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, sorry guys. In here I had some cheap ASU 85Ms, 10-point vehicles, but still effective against Bradleys. And if I'd lose these, well, it was a bit unfortunate, but it turned out that they did a pretty good job against these Bradleys. Why my ally here wasn't pushing up, I'm not sure about, because he had the ability to do so. I was a bit too focused up here to really be of help, so I'd put these things on attack move. Every now and then I had them move up here. As you can see, there were some Abrams here, which is a bad position for them because they could get easily wiped out by infantry. If you want to use Abrams in this sector, if I would have been blue 4, I'd have put the Abrams maybe a bit more here or there so they could fire down the road. Now, in the meanwhile, in my zone, my command vehicle got destroyed because I was careless with it. This is a good lesson for me, and I hope for you. Always have your command vehicle in cover, because one of those Apaches managed to take it out. Or the command vehicle, I'm not really sure which it was. Now, one thing I was missing in my deck was a scout helicopter, so instead I had to bring in scout infantry, offload them into these mountains and try to get eyes on Fedor, which would be a real disruption to their reinforcements. Because it's right in the middle, and if we can capture this zone, we can bring in reinforcements from the middle to both Elena and Leonid, and that would have been a really good help. Now, we're dealing with a Tornado ECR here, which is taking out most of my AA, which is almost all of it radar guided. And unfortunately, oh yeah, I do get it, 150 points. For 2 Sopals, which is 90 points in total, so that's a good trade again. Over here, my ASUs are fighting these Bradleys, and by doing that I can take the pressure off of this infantry so that they can start to deal with those riflemen. A little more to the right, I still had 2 of these BM-24Ms. These are the napalm rocket artillery, but I decided against firing them at this position because I could hit these Motostrelki. So I decided not to do it because it was too risky. I'm also calling in a couple of these CSU 57-2s. For 20 points they are remarkably durable vehicles. And this was a bit of a strange slugfest because my ZSU had about 7% accuracy. They have a 15% accuracy base, and then they were panicked, so they were not exactly effective. The Cobra, on the other hand, couldn't do anything either, because it already spent its rockets. It was down to its grenade launcher and firing HE ammo at a 5 AP value frontal armor. So this was an interesting standoff. Now I'm just going to pause it here for a little to show you exactly what I'm doing. I have recon out here to overwatch this zone. I have some infantry here as a tripwire, which I can use if anything decides to push into me from that side. I have a Grom in the middle, which is resupplying, or which is getting resupplied by my MI6. I have my command vehicle. I brought in another one, which is my last one, by the way. Had some napalm tanks in case I would encounter infantry or more infantry in this town. I have a ZSU 57-2, which is greatly out of position here. The much better position for this helicopter, for this anti-helicopter unit would have been here, where I'd have been able to actually shoot at something, but from here, with a 1575 meter range, it's not going to do anything. In here I have 2 T-72s, just the cheap variety, the base T-72, still good tanks for 45 points, and I just had them here in case they pushed up with some vehicles here, but they didn't. Over here I have more T-72s as a reserve force. I have my ASUs helping out in this zone. I have still my infantry here, which is out of position, I now realize. And these Groms are also out of position, so I should have moved these up as well. But at some point you just get too many vehicles and you just lose sight of exactly what is going on. In the meanwhile, I'm also pushing up with my recon and some infantry because I was hoping to get their command vehicle. Now, the fact that I managed to make it here is really bad news for Blue 4. I should never have been able to make it this far. But by getting this far in, I hop to the next bush, and from there on out I'm able to spot their next vehicle, their command vehicle here. Now this was troubling. This was 2 Apaches versus my T-72s. These T-72s were never going to survive against these Apaches, because these Hellfire missiles are just devastating, and especially to a cheap tank like that. What those Apaches weren't counting on was my large amount of AA here, and especially these Groms, which by now are elite. They just kept firing AA missile after AA missile, and they just kept scoring Apache kills. There, it's another 130 down. I'm also thinking that this guy wasn't paying attention because he killed my tanks, and he just kept his Apaches here. They were not moving, even when he lost one. So, the next minute he finally decides to relocate it, but not before he gets taken down by this ZSU-23. And unfortunately, by dropping below the hills or the forests, he was able to evade my Grom there. Now, what he was thinking here, I have no idea. I had no helicopters here, except for this Sokol. I had a ton of AA. There were no air superiority fighters anywhere from our side. So what exactly were these 15A Eagles doing there? Unfortunately, my self-propelled AA guns couldn't exactly do a lot here. They were incapable of taking down that plane. And because I was dealing with the Apaches, I also decided to call in some Mi-2 URS. These are the AA helicopters. And I try to get these guys to work on the helicopters, which were already dead at that point. But now I spot the Thunderbolt. And I think, well, short range Strela 3s against a Thunderbolt, it might just work. Unfortunately, a Thunderbolt is a heavily armored plane. It comes with 2 frontal armor, and you can just see how much punishment this plane can soak up. Unfortunately, he cannot soak up enough. I wasn't able to get the Nighthawk here, and this is where stuff gets interesting, because they still had Delta Force in here, and I accidentally tripped over these guys. So, calling my helicopters back a little bit to get them out of range of Delta Force. There goes the Nighthawk for 150 points. Good trade-off, 45 or 40 point AA gun versus a 150 point plane. And now my TO-55s get to work on these Delta Forces, which are also taking a lot of autocannon fire from these Mi-2s. Yeah, good luck against that napalm, boys. It's 2 down. The third one's probably burning. Now, I had called in some Niwas here, which were by now out of position. And by out of position, I mean that they were too far in front of everything else. And they had no protection against helicopters. They can shoot at helicopters, don't get me wrong, but against 6 helicopters that proved to be a bit much. Over here I had moved up with my scouts and spotted their command helicopter. Again, not exactly sitting in a good position, but then again there's not really a good position for a command helicopter in this zone, maybe behind these bushes here. I also spotted a longbow on the ground. I think he was rearming using this FOB, but I'm not sure. So I had the chance to take out a command helicopter for 100 points and then a longbow for 150 points. Immediately put down an attack marker. Someone else recognized it and said, okay, firing. And this was Ephion or Osis. I had also called in some Danas by now, because I was recognizing, yeah, here we go, that's the Niwas down. I recognized that I needed artillery to fire at these guys, so I called them in. They were starting to aim, but in the meanwhile, further back, there were some more vehicles ready to fire. And these are the vehicles from Osis. He was able to take down those guys over there. And then there's these Smirches, which are also Osis's and are going to fire as well. Now you can just see how much supplies those things take from these FOBs, because he had 2 FOBs and they were almost empty. In the meanwhile, I'm scoring hit after hit on these Cobras. Unfortunately, I had to give up my Niwas here, which were the last long-range airplane defense I had. Finally, he recognized that I had a lot of AA here, so he pulled back his helicopters. And now you can see just a flurry of fire from all sorts of missiles. Let's see where this is coming from. Yeah, Eurogans. That was a lot of fire and was all coming for this command helicopter. If he would have been there, because he was dead at this point, he would have died instantly. If you ask me, this was a bit of overkill, but if you can neutralize a command zone that way, yeah, it might be worth it. So that was Vader out of the way. In the meanwhile, my ally on my right flank pushed in very, very hard. And there were a couple of guys here. This was Swooty, I believe, Swiggity Swooty. I also had Osis here. I had Killer Whale here. And they were all pushing into Michael and Leonid. And they were doing a good job, because this way they had a lot of pressure on Leonid. They could not call in units from Feder anymore, so the only reinforcement zone they had left was over here, Elena, Anna, and we were also starting to push onto Gregory. And all of this black smoke you can see is coming from the launch which just happened from my BM-24s. Whoops. So I decided to call in some more AA, which is redundant, because at this point in the game there was nothing to be shooting at. They did do some sorties with planes here, but the more interesting targets were over here, this longbow and these Avengers. Very weak targets, very soft targets for 45 points each. So that was going to be my next objective. And I also had these guys relocate. This is the Grom party I had over here earlier. Decided to push them up and had them walk from here on out over the hill to get a couple of shots on those Apaches. Over here there were some more Groms, and these Groms were in position or getting positioned to this building to deal with that helicopter push we saw earlier. But by the time they got there, the helicopters were dead, or at least gone. And I decided to push them into this forest, where I could get some shots on passing helicopters, and particularly this longbow. That was my main objective. You can see some frogs running off here, and the fact that there are frogs running off means that there might have been some infantry which was unloaded, or these were the transports for the Delta Force, which I just killed here. I wasn't exactly too sure, but hey, a couple of cheap helicopter kills, why not? In the meanwhile, my Dana artillery is firing at these Avengers, and they are also taking a lot of fire from Buratinos on this side. And I think he's going to push in with his VDV next. Interestingly, before the zone was clear, he was also pushing in with a command vehicle. He already called one in. So he was really good, really well anticipating when a command vehicle would be needed. Because we knew by this time that if we pushed in hard, we could capture Michael and get another reinforcement zone here. So spreading my infantry out into 3 groups. I had a couple of here and a couple here to deal with that Apache. Over here nothing was going on, and I was only focused on this sector by now. And as you can see, they now captured Leonid, or at least pushed out the other command vehicle. So that was really a good move on their part. Good job, guys. You can see just the intense black smoke here. We have absolutely no idea if there's anything left in here, if anything survived. There was a command vehicle in here. And I'm not sure why he picked this target, because yeah, it's a town. But I think he fired 4 Buratinos at that. This is one group, and there's another group here, which is also empty. In my case, I would have fired 1 salvo of Buratinos in this town, and the other here. just to have all the infantry which could have been in there killed. Here we got another longbow going down, 150 points. And all he manages to do is take down one of these Topaz 2As. He wasn't even going for these Streltsas. So that's 10-point vehicle for a 150-point helicopter. Excellent trade. Let's get it back to normal view. In the east, they were now pushing in hard to this zone and trying to get a command vehicle in here as well. Because from here on out we could easily push into Elena. Because then you're doing a flanking attack and it's harder for them to defend. This zone was still heavily contested. There was not a lot going on here. Because I was too focused on this zone over in the north, I decided to give my allies some support, being a support deck. So I landed 2 Mi-6s carrying 3,700 liters of supplies each. And by doing this I was able to refuel and rearm all of these groups here. And this is really one of the crucial parts of a support deck. As you can see, I'm being quite aggressive with it. But by doing this you also help your allies keep on their push. They keep going, they keep fighting. And that's your job. Get those support helicopters in there, even if they're not your units. I know you don't get any points for it, but you will help your team win the battle. And that was more important here for me. This force was initially going into this sector, but then everything came in from that side, and you can see just the amount of tanks they had in here was amazing. Just one big armored Soviet push. So at this point I decided, nah, it's not worth it to get more vehicles in here. So instead I was going to be the spearhead into this zone, where the command vehicle was dead. We already took care of that earlier. I was going to capture this fob. And as you can see, since we captured this zone, they're now flying air sorties over this zone, so that their helicopters and their air superiority fighters would go down quick. Now, and this is always a point in time where I struggle a little bit, because by now I have so many units on the field, and maybe by your standards it's not even that much, but for my standards it's quite a bit. And they were pretty spread out. I had some in the north, some over in the east. I had a good concentration here in Cheriton, and I had some units here. At this point I have to pick up everything I have and relocate it into the next zone. Or call in more new units. And that's something I usually struggle with. Because it means I have to micromanage a whole lot of units. I have to get all of these Groms back in transports and get them moving. I have to get these Streltsas moving again. I have to get these tanks moving again. Now these I was focused on, so this was not a problem. But these guys, I could have used all of these guys in the push, but instead I ended up barely doing that because I was just not focused on that zone. So this is really a point where I have to improve my game. I have to learn to pick up all of the units I have here. For example, these TO-55s, they had a ton of fuel left. And they could easily start to push into Gregory, because I wasn't focused on it. I had no idea what kind of units I had left. I really need to focus on getting this better next time. So, Fedor's next. Let's speed this up a little to get to an interesting part, because this is just a lot of relocating we're doing here. Now, Fedor's captured. We have a UAZ here. So immediately everybody starts to spawn in new units. Tungushkas, Books. I start to spawn in a couple of AA units as well. Because these DAPs are pretty damn dangerous helicopters. They're pretty much a poor man's Apache. If you look at it, they have, where the Apache has one autocannon, they have two. They have miniguns to suppress infantry, although the minigun on this helicopter is not that great because of its low range. But you can use these things against helicopters as well. And then it has 8 semi-active Hellfires, so you gotta keep eyes on the target, but they can really quickly inflict a lot of damage. And add to that a speed of 300 kph, and you have a very, very quick, good response force helicopter. And now of course he can do some damage, but he was quickly taken out by all of these units which are coming in now. I recognized I still had all of these Sokol helicopters, which dropped off my infantry in the initial push. So I decided to pick up all of my Groms here, which was already a big plus for me because I remembered I had Groms in here. And then I decided to forget them, more or less. Only later on in the game I'm deciding to pick up these units and send them all the way here. But by then it was too late, there was nothing to be done. So, reinforcements from my end coming in. A good wave of ASU 85Ms. Now, if you haven't tried these things, I'd recommend it. It's basically just the very old SU 85, 1966, 30% accuracy but 9 AP power. So they can kill IFVs, they can kill even some medium tanks if you get a good angle on them. They have a machine gun against infantry, not that great. The range against ground vehicles is not that great, and the armor is not that good either. But keep in mind, it's a 10-point vehicle. How can you go wrong with any of these? Also calling in some more scout tanks. I have some more ZSU 57-2s, just to give me some AA capability. And over here I had some of these how do you pronounce that? Hypnerits. AA units, because although my allies had a couple of them, they weren't that fast. These were wheeled vehicles, so they could go 150 kph on road, whereas these things couldn't, these Tungushkas. So I was the Vanguard AA unit, and I was busy suppressing AA units, or sorry, airplanes, and trying to get some suppression in against helicopters which might be brought in here. As you can see, we're for now completely bypassing this FOB. It's not important. None of these FOBs are important at this point. The only thing we want to find is their command infantry. Right here. Once you get that out of the way, they neutralize this zone, and all they got left at this point is Elena, or Anna. Because by now we had also neutralized Gregory. And, God, colorblind. This guy was really doing a good job here, because he pushed him from the side. He could have pushed in with more of his units here, and at this point it seems all of my ASUs here were dead, but I'm sure they did their damage. So I decided to also get in some Mi-2 URPs. These are pretty much all-round helicopters, although they don't exactly look like a gunship if you have a good look at them. They're more like, I don't know, a transport helicopter which accidentally had some weapons placed on it. But they have a nice variety. They can fire Strelas, so they can take out helicopters, they can take out airplanes, they can take out tanks, and they can take out infantry with an autocannon. Unfortunately, these Brennises are armed with an autocannon, so it was a bit dangerous for my helicopters to get in there, and I lost 3 of them. So I had to learn from that. And I think he's going to get taken out quickly anyway. So again, leading the Vanguard here, pushing up far into the enemy zone, trying to get Anna out of the way as quickly as possible. And this was the only zone they had left, apart from Boris. But once they lost this zone, they couldn't call in anything else. And you can see just how many players are quitting now. I got my Hypnerits, my AA units here. I got some helicopters flying in, and these had mostly only their autocannons left, so they weren't going to be very effective against anything. I was trying to get the artillery, but my ally beat me to it with a bombing run. Another UAZ is being brought in, and it has a very short way to go, because it comes in from Anna, captures Anna, sorry, it comes in from Elena, captures Anna, and we're done. So here we see a slugfest between my Jaguars, which are very cheap tanks, 55 points, versus 120 point M1A1 Abrams. Now I wasn't alone, which is a good thing, otherwise these Jaguars would have just been wiped out. I had a PTZ-89 from an ally, which is a good tank destroyer. They also had BMD-3s with autocannons and anti-tank weapons. So these guys also came in at elite, which gave them a 90% accuracy. This thing was not really going to be effective against the Abrams tank that heavy. And it was starting to run out of fuel. But luckily I was able to, with the help of my allies, destroy these tanks. And you can just see how effective these BMD-3s are. So I didn't lose any Jaguars, which was nice. Saved me a couple of losses. Neutralized the zone. I'm not sure who did it. It's not important, but we got it. So there you go. This is how I played a support deck, and I was able to play a lot more aggressive with it than I had expected. I'd expected to be the same role as I was playing with the US, but the Poland support deck seems to be pretty effective. Now let's have a look at the wins losses. I had 2800 kills versus 1700 losses, which is a good ratio. And you can see just how many command points I captured, because I was just supplying command vehicle after command vehicle. 12,000 command points. Have a look at the kill list. It's pretty varied. It's pretty evenly spread out between all of my units. There's not one unit who did an excellent job, but pretty much all of them got more damage done than their point worth. So I was happy with all of the performances here. Let's see. No, actually I think these guys took out the last command infantry in the last zone in Anna. Let's have a look at the losses. We lost a transport to Delta Force. We lost some AA units to seaplanes, a Prowler and a Raven. Yeah, right. They did a Nighthawk strike on my Sopals, 90 points. Well, that's fine. Apaches were a big problem. More helicopters, so I gotta get more AA units in here. Let's see, some more tanks I lost, or I lost units to tanks. And here you can see the kills done by the tanks. The tanks took out my helicopters. The Abrams took out all of my AA, all of my Hypnerites. I keep getting that wrong, sorry guys. And then these ZSUs, these were cheap AA units. I lost a couple to various units. So I'm very happy with the performance of this deck. If you want to see a dedicated video outlining how this deck is set up, please check my other video where I outline this deck. It's in the description below. I also added the import code. I'm recording this video of the replay first, so there might be some small changes to the deck as I'm revising it in the next video. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned how you can actually use a support deck in a semi-offensive role without purely spamming artillery. I have seen people do that, and that's not being an asset to your team. Yeah, it can work, but mostly it's not very effective. You're effective with a support deck when you're using it in a role like I am doing. I'm not saying mine is the only right way to do it, don't get me wrong. Supply your allies with logistics, provide command vehicles, get AA in there, find holes in the friendly offense and fill those holes with the units you have. Like I did with the ASUs in the town, like I did with my AA, and like I did with the fast AA in the final push. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit like. If you want to see more of my videos, subscribe to my channel. I have by now about, I think, 90 videos up, so you can watch for hours. And if you have a question or suggestion for my mode of play, please leave a comment below. I always look forward to hearing from you. So thanks for watching, and see you in another video.